Hello and welcome back to the cutting mat. It's been a while since the last channel upload, but it's been nice to revisit the channel and see the subscribers are still there, and there's been some nice comments just asking for an update as to how things are going. So the Undead army is now completely finished. I wanted to show it all in one go just to provide an overview as to how things went together, what it looks like as a force on the table. Just to give maybe a bit of a insight and enthusiasm as to people that may be doing the same sort of thing. So earlier on in the channel I showed the unboxing of the Undead halberdiers, which I painted first off, and they were quite a challenge in that there's a lot of bone, there's a lot of armour, there's a lot of cloth, leathers, a lot of detail to paint on these guys. But I did them first of all, and I feel like I got them right. And they gave me a good base to then move on to the rest of the army. So after painting these chaps, I then moved on to the Undead Skeleton Warriors, the sort of Ray Harryhausen flailing skeletons. And these are sort of supplied on sprue, very, very thin, very wiry, sort of, you can achieve quite dynamic poses. And how you assemble them sort of determines how the mini looks to a greater extent, maybe than more than sort of monopose or more chunkier miniatures. So I really spent a lot of time trying to make sure that they were either very rigid, very stiff, clearly reanimated undead, or these sort of screaming, attacking skeletons. And spending that extra time in the assembly, I think paid off. So I put those together: scimitars, spears, swords. Try to avoid axes. I think the axes don't look good. But yeah, they came together well. The banner I'm particularly pleased with. So from the halberdiers to the warriors, I then moved on to the grave guard, who were sort of like a palette cleanser in a way, because the warriors were such like a batch paint, skeleton after skeleton after skeleton, painting very similar sort of areas, very similar sort of just weapons, just bone, just shields. These I felt like I could give a little bit more time to, so I made them a little bit more charismatic. I tried to make them a bit more intimidating, a bit more menacing. I spent more time on the shields, a bit of time sort of like the five-pointed star, or this checkerboard type effect on the unit behind. But I think they paid off, because I always remember, like, must have been early 2000s, late 90s, my friend saying that he had a regiment of Grave Guard, and sort of reading up on them on White Dwarf and things, and battle reports, and they had this genuinely sort of frightening presence in terms of how they were reported. Like, they were the elite undead. They were skeletons that could mess you up. Like, they had this sort of real fear around them. So I wanted to make sure that I had a regiment of these in any undead army that I was going to put together. So I wanted to spend time on them, and I did, and I think it pays off. So after these guys, I was again ready to sort of launch into some sort of quite basic, largely bone type units. So I moved on to the Undead Cavalry. And they've got a very basic sort of skull and crossbones motif on the banner, which I think you can see there. Again, trying to make sure I assembled them in the right way to make them look sort of fluid, aggressive, like they're flying into the charge. And I think that worked, all apart from the guy at the back there, who kind of looks like he's peeping over a hedge. It's like, well, what have they got over there? They got some ham? What is it? I don't know. Anyway, he doesn't look so interested, but the rest of them, they look like they're doing their bit. So yeah, got those guys done. The chariot, which you've seen the unboxing for, I've got that nice sort of red yoke over the horses there. The archer firing off to the side, and the lancer sort of trying to poke someone in the eye. They both look like they're having a good time. So yeah, I think I got the poses right. I'd hit my stride in terms of painting bone. It all seemed to come together quite nicely. But having done those guys and the cavalry, I felt like I was then able to move on to some elite cavalry. Like, you got to do a good job of the elite cavalry. So I did the undead wights on horseback, and they all came together nicely. But there's a particular favourite of mine is this chap, which is the, there we go. He's got this sort of medieval samurai type winged helmet. Each individual wing of his helmet is supplied as a individual component, so you sort of glue these on. He's not sort of a leader of any type, but I think he looks the part. And they are led by Lord Doom himself, with the largest hat you've ever seen, and what I kind of always thought was a camel that he was riding, but it's just a particularly knackered horse. So yeah, as having always wanted this guy, having seen him in White Dwarf, I always wanted to pick him up. So having painted him as the leaders of the elite cavalry, it felt like it all paid off. And then last of all is the vampire lord. So I needed the general. If I can get this to focus. There we go. I was particularly happy with how sort of the skin palette came out on this guy. It's clearly dead and loving it type, purple and pale. I'd highlighted him up. Sorry, the focus is not working very well. There we are. Yeah, I'd highlighted him up a little bit brighter than the rest of the army, just to make him stand out as the army general. But yeah, that was him. There is of course the direwolves, which I'd unboxed in a previous video, and the Doomwolf, and the two necromancers, Clive and Steve. Who I think act as good sidekicks to the vampire lord. So yeah, that's it. That's the army done. I feel like it has a good table presence. It looks like sort of an advancing evil horde that's going to come towards you and ruin your day. But part of the reason that there's been such a break since the last video is that I've been working on a terrain project. So there's the painting up these guys and some Bretonians. My daughter sort of said, oh, can we play with the toy soldiers sometime? And I said, well, yeah, sure. That's probably just a throwaway comment, right? But I thought, if we're going to do this, I want to do this in the most brightly, perfectly laid out, very engaging sort of way. So I thought I'd better put a gaming table together. So I have completed work on this, which is my gaming table. There's a cottage, there's a pub, there's a barn, and there's a tiled house with the castle you've already seen, bridge and a river. I wanted to lay this out in such a way that when my kids saw it on the table, she's like, yeah, I want to play with that. And it worked out quite well. We've had a few games so far, largely games that she has to win, but something that will keep her engaged, keep her interested, make her want to play it again, which I think is a big part of trying to get your kids into gaming. So yeah, I might do a follow-up video on the terrain that I've created and what it was sort of required, what materials I used and things like that. But until then, thank you for continuing to follow, and I'll see you again at the cutting mat.